All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, with the 2024 election behind us, I thought it would be a good idea to give a potential swing state preview for 2028. This is obviously a very early preview. 2026, 2027, we'll know more. But based off of 2024 and some of the swings, specifically the swings to the right in some of these liberal states, where would I classify them? This is not really a J.D. Vance versus Newsom or Tulsi versus someone. This is more so just general vibe on each state with what we know in 2024 going into 2028. And I'll still do the safe Republican, safe Democrat, Republican lean, Democrat lean, and then the swing states. Most of these we'll be able to agree on, but maybe some of them I will go out on a limb. So obviously Washington, Oregon, and California, clear liberal states. There's pretty much no questions about that. Also Hawaii at this point. Although maybe if J.D. Vance picks Tulsi Gabbard, it's a swing state. Honestly, there would probably be some dialogue about it being a swing state if that happened. I know there was the idea if Trump picked her, it would be, but I don't think so. I mean, it did swing Republican by like 6.5 points. It was one of the bigger states to swing to the right in terms of just percentage, but I think it's very clearly a liberal state. Republican states, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, North and South Dakota. You do have Nebraska. You've got all the areas in Nebraska outside of the 2nd District, and you do have Alaska as well, clear Republican states, Utah, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. We know Texas, they wanted to try it, liberals did, but Trump really put a stop to it. Texas in 2016 was around a 9.5 point margin, or 2016 it was like a 12.5. 2016 it was 9.5. 2020 it was 5.8, and in 2024 it was 14. So even, I mean, you can't say that's a swing state or anywhere close. I never thought it was a swing state in 2024. The polls were looking very good for at least a 7 or an 8 point margin, and we know what happened in Texas. So that's good. And by the way, Texas, this is what Republicans need to do to win the popular vote. Not that it matters a ton, but it would have been very annoying to hear liberals still say that, oh, more people voted against Trump. You need to run up the margins in a Texas, in a Florida. Republicans won that state. Or Trump won that state by 13 points. Texas by 14, Florida by 13. Obviously, you do also have Nevada. Nevada, I think, right now is a clear swing state. There's no way I could give it to either candidate. Trump did win it by around 3 points, which did surprise me. I thought he was going to win it by 1 to 1.5 maybe, based on polling and other data. The state slowly but surely had been shifting to the right. They hadn't won it since like 2004. Trump finally gets through and Republicans are able to win it in 2024, but I cannot say it's a Republican lean at this point. Now, honestly, based on a 3-point margin, if we get really good, in 2025, 2026 voter registration data that's swinging even more so to the right, you could argue maybe it is a tilt Republican or, a slight lean Republican, but right now I do have to say it is a pure swing state. When it comes to Arizona, I am going to say you could argue tilt, you could argue lean. People say it's still a swing state, and yeah, but if you've got like a 6-point win, even though Kari Lake lost, there's a lot of reasons why she lost. She got no money, and also we know Kari Lake, at least when you compare her to other senators, she's got people either love her or they hate her, and a lot of people in Arizona, they did split ballot voting, and I know people are angry she lost, but when you look at Arizona and you look at Trump, the 6-point victory, I would say Republicans are the favorite in that state going into 2028. We'll have to see if the voter registration data continues to improve. When it comes to New Mexico, I'm going to say it's a lean. It's a 5 or 6 point Dem advantage right now. I mean, they won it by that much. So I really wouldn't change it. You could argue based on the way it's shifting because the margin was a lot closer. It was like an 8-point margin, or I think a 9-point margin in 2020. And in 2024, I think it was around 6.5. So it's moving a little bit, but I would still say it's like a lean Democrat to a tilt Democrat at this point. Colorado is a clear Democratic state. There's no doubt about it based on population shifts. Hillary only won it by 4.5, but even with the 2024 overperformance by Trump, he was not able to get it within like 12 or 13. And same thing happened with Oregon, by the way. People were wondering, could Oregon potentially swing a little bit? You've got that movement going on in Eastern Oregon. A lot of those people, very conservative, they want to join Idaho. We'll have to see if that ends up happening. When it comes to Minnesota, it's never going to go right. But now Minnesota at this point, I would put it in a similar category to New Mexico. You could argue maybe even a higher chance, but I don't think it's a swing state. At least I wouldn't classify it as a swing state going into 2028 right now. If you want to be cautious, I would say like a 3 or 4 point margin for Democrats at this point. When it comes to Iowa, Well, if you listen, you think that you look at that poll where Trump was down by 3. Now, Iowa's a clear Republican state. Trump won it by like 13 to 14. He won it in 2016. He won it in 2020 by easy margins. You've got Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio now. And Ohio was an 11.5-point win. Not the same shift we saw in Texas and Florida, but still a very nice shift for Trump. Pretty crazy Ohio, previously a swing state as late as 2020. Although it didn't end up being a swing state in the election, Trump won it by 8. But now we're seeing just an unbelievable shift in the state of Ohio to the point where it is a clear Republican state. There's no doubt about it. When it comes to the Rust Belt, I think all of these states, you have to classify them as pure swing states. There's just all of them were very close. Trump was able to win all of them, but a couple, of the Senate races went the other way. It just goes to show you how close those races really were. Trump won Pennsylvania by 2 points. That's a solid win. I mean, they're going to be so close. Michigan, Trump wins by I think around a point, and then Wisconsin was also by around a point. So very, very close states. They all are pure swing states. Georgia, I think, is definitely a pure swing state. You just look at how much Kemp won Georgia by and the fact that it previously was a Republican state. I understand the shifts in the suburbs surrounding Atlanta, and that was even a problem in 2024. A lot of those counties shifted left, but all the rurals were more right. But Georgia, I have to say, it's a swing state. I can't give Republicans any edge right now. North Carolina has to be a swing state as well, and Republicans could run into an issue to where you're looking at a population shift with people moving in from New York and making it even more liberal. When it comes to Virginia, I would probably say right now it is a very slight lean to tilt Democrat. That would just be my rough estimation right now. It was a little bit disappointing. I thought it was going to be slightly closer of a margin. I thought it would be around 3.5. It ended up being, I think, 5.5, so 2 points. Not terrible, but I did think Virginia was going to be a little bit closer. However, depending on who the 2028 candidate is, Republicans can definitely win a state like Virginia. When it comes to Illinois, Illinois was around 8 points in total. Could Republicans potentially, and by the way, there's some early data or some data that's come out when Biden was still in the race, and I might do a video on this, a separate video, where Trump was going to win over 400 electoral votes based on Democrat internal polling, and I think a lot of that got leaked, but it was so bad to where it looked like Trump was going to win New Jersey and New York and possibly Illinois. At this point, an 8-point, 9-point margin in Illinois would have been unheard of 3-4 years ago, but that's how much it shifted. If crime continues to be an issue, liberals are going to get more and more unpopular in that state. Obviously, Chicago is going to be a huge hurdle. It's still going to be a huge hurdle for Republicans to overcome. But Illinois, you're starting to see signs very similar to what's happening in New York and New Jersey. Now, these are states that are definitely lean Democrat. New York, Illinois was around 8 points. New York was 11.5 to 12 points. But those are crazy shifts. He cut the lead that liberals had in New York in half from 2020 to 2024. It was 23, then it's down to 12. A lot of liberals will argue, well, that's because there were a lot of Democrats in these non-swing states that didn't really go to the polls and vote, and they'll be able to get them in 2028. I will say Democrats are certainly the favorite in Illinois and New York, but imagine them having to waste assets in an Illinois, in a New York, in a New Jersey. I would say right now New Jersey is a tilt to a lean Democrat when it comes to 2028. There are people saying, well, it's a swing state. We would have to see some significant polling. You're talking about the Democrats investing no money into New Jersey, and they they end up winning it. Listen, that's a 5.5 to 6 points. It is shifting. You could certainly argue that New Jersey is a swing state. It's very close. But right now, I would say it's a very slight maybe a 2-3 point advantage, depending on what you look at there. When it comes to New Hampshire, I'm going to say New Hampshire is a pure swing state going into 2028. It was around a 3-point margin in Biden's favor. Trump made up significant ground. There's a lot of independents in that state. I think it'll enter the 2028 cycle as a swing state, and we will be referring to it and looking at the 4 electoral votes and wondering where they will end up going. When it comes to this Nebraska 2nd District, it was closer than I thought. I'm going to put maybe a tilt Democrat by a few points. It was only 4. I thought it was going to be a 7 or an 8-point win for Harris, and that's based on population shift within the district, which is mainly Omaha and the surrounding area, and it really didn't happen. It was a very close race. So I would say you could even argue that could be, honestly, that's probably going to be a swing state going into 2028, or a swing district, I should say. It's just one electoral vote. We'll see if they try and maybe make Nebraska winner take all. They kind of did a half attempt towards the end of the summer. The Republicans did, and it didn't end up working out. Same thing with Maine. I wonder if they'll try and do that. But when it comes to Maine at large, I would say it was about a 7-point win for Harris. I would say it's a lean Democrat going into 2028 at this point. The one district is a clear Democrat, and the other district clear Republican. When you're talking about Vermont, Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, D.C., Rhode Island, Massachusetts, although Massachusetts also swung pretty far to Trump, those states are obviously going to be liberal leaning. And then you've also got, I guess, two others. There we go with South Carolina and West Virginia. So this is what it kind of looks like going into 2028. This math for conservatives is just amazing. There's certain states you could argue, like you could argue New Jersey based off of things. You could also argue Arizona and have even more swing states. You could even argue Virginia, Minnesota, if you wanted even more swing states, depending on how many you want. But I would say Minnesota right now, Virginia, lean Democrat, Arizona, lean tilt, maybe Republican, New Jersey, lean tilt, Democrat, and then New Hampshire is another pure swing state. So I'm adding New Hampshire to the swing states. We were talking about the big 7 swing states. Well, I've got 7 here, but it's not Arizona. Arizona moves into a potential more likely Republican column with the margin that Trump was able to win it by and the way it's shifting. And then you've got a new, and by the way, we'll see what happens with Arizona being a border state. That's also going to play into it with the Democrats and how poorly they handled that illegal immigration. It was basically a grade of an F. So you would hope that Trump would win it by maybe even more than that, because obviously in 2028 it's going to be a little bit harder because Trump's going to be in office, unless maybe the narrative will be he did amazing on the border. But normally when you're talking about incumbents, Trump's not going to be an incumbent, but the incumbent party, it probably will be a little bit closer, although we'll see which way it trends. I mean, look at what happened with Ohio. Ohio was an 8-point win, an 8-point win, and then an 11-point win. Maybe Arizona is headed for a similar thing when it comes to that. And Ohio does have major cities just like Arizona, so we'll have to see what happens there. But I took away Arizona and I added New Hampshire, and I'm also looking at a New Jersey. We're looking at a Virginia. We're looking at a Minnesota, but obviously the Rust Belt, undeniably, they're still swing states. We all know that. Georgia, North Carolina, I really don't think you could argue unless, listen, there was some really, really, really good Trump polling towards the end in Georgia. I was shocked people were picking Harris to win Georgia based off of the polling there at the end. I mean, you had every pollster say that Trump was going to win. And a lot of these people are out there saying, well, the polls were so wrong again. They really weren't. The polling was pretty solid. Real Clear Politics, I think, had Trump at 287, and they would have had Trump almost up to 300 electoral votes if they didn't have a sham CNN poll, which nuked their total aggregate, I think, in the state of either Michigan or Wisconsin. I think it was Wisconsin, where CNN had Harris up by 6. It was a total outlier, and it made the aggregate lean to Harris by like 0.3. If that poll wasn't in there, it probably would have leaned Trump by like 0.1, 0.2. So Real Clear Politics was pretty solid in terms of the polls that they used. They had Trump at 287. He got 312. That's not too far off. And I mean, the polls were, I would say the polls were fine. I mean, there's going to be some polls that are off. There's going to be more liberal polls. Bloomberg was horrible throughout the entire cycle. CNN's final polls were terrible. Marist's final polls were terrible. But knowing how they grade pollsters, they'll probably be elevated to like an A++ after that. I mean, they like give them A+ for getting things wrong. And I said, why is Marist an A? They get it. And then, of course, Marist gets everything wrong. But most of the pollsters were good. Atlas Intel nails it. Rasmussen was solid again. And the overall aggregate was a Trump victory. That's what it was saying. It was saying Trump at 287, and Trump ends up getting 312. But even the states where Trump wasn't leading, he was down by like 0.3, 0.4. And we already knew that he overperformed in the polls relative to those states back in 2016 and 2020. So I think right now I could see Georgia, depending on what happens. If, obviously we're going to get a ton of polling from now until 2028. You could maybe say it's a lean Republican, but just based off the 2024 election, some of those suburbs surrounding Atlanta did go left. And so I would say it's still a pure swing state. I think North Carolina's as close as you can get at this point. Nevada, we'll see. It could continue to shift right. But this math right now for conservatives is amazing when you're talking about where it used to be with Florida and Ohio both being swing states. It was really, really bad. And also Nevada being a lean Democrat and possibly Arizona being a swing state or even a lean Dem. The math is so much better right now. Possibly also getting Virginia into the mix. Minnesota, we'll see. And then you're also talking about a New Jersey, then New York and Illinois. you're really, really expanding the map if you're able to do this. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.